Sure. And if you have the agenda, Shannon's going to talk to us about just what has been happening around safe and ethical access to medical cannabis. And if you're paying attention at all to what's going outside and around us in the city, it's just pretty devastating, just the onslaught.
We're refusing to acknowledge that this is a federal issue. This is a congressional issue. The crackdown doesn't stop until we get to Congress. And well, I certainly raised enough hell for Nancy Pelosi over the years. There's one idea that we have the meeting of the minds on, and that has been historically medical cannabis. So basically what happened in the Patient Advocacy Committee of the Medical Cannabis Task Force, which I chair, we had a subcommittee created to deal with sort of saving safe access in San Francisco. And the two chairs weren't able to be here tonight. Their names are Christina and Jade. And Christina works at Waterfall Wellness, a local dispensary that's very compassionate. And Chef Jade has her own medicinal drinks company. And so it was kind of nice from the Patient Advocacy Committee to have two women who are also working more on a commercial level, because as we all know, Access to Love, which is what I do outside of the Medical Cannabis Task Force, isn't really in the commercial arena. And it's very clear by what the federal government is doing that their attack is directly on regulated commercial arena. It's not on the individual patient. It's on the commercial arena. And the sad part about it is that while there's a few people and a few groups of people in San Francisco that exist as extended families and know how to get medical cannabis if everything were to close, there's thousands and thousands upon patients that would not have a clue where to get medical cannabis that was safe, that they wouldn't be ripped off for. And it kind of goes into the having a well-lit environment and having some regulation in place so that you know what you're purchasing. And as the patient, one of the patient advocate seats of the Medical Cannabis Task Force, there's only 2 patient advocate seats, and we probably represent more people than a single supervisor does as far as how many people find safe access effective to their life. So when we looked at the campaign, we looked at what are we going to do. There's other groups doing other things, and what I can tell you is sign on to all of it, but we decided to target Nancy Pelosi, and I just want to read the postcard and explain some of the issues that it brings up. First of all, we'd like to thank Nancy Pelosi for a long-standing commitment to patients' rights and support for the use of medical cannabis in California. In keeping with that commitment, I urge you to speak with President Obama about the unwarranted persecution of medical cannabis patients in our sanctuary city of San Francisco and statewide. In an effort to mitigate and hopefully end this persecution, I ask you to vote resources towards investigating the unconstitutionality, I always have a problem with it, but I said it, of the California dispensary closures as set forth in the recent hearings of James versus United States. Additionally, I ask that you support the city facilitation of emergency safe access to medical cannabis for catastrophically ill patients in the event of the closure of all permitted facilities in San Francisco. So there's a couple things that make the Patient Advocacy Subcommittee a little bit different than a lot of the other campaigns that are going on currently. One, we bring up a case in the Orange County District federal judge actually agreed to hear this, and it's James versus United States. And what it brings up is in Washington, D.C. right now, they are opening 5 huge, mega medical cannabis facilities. Congress voted to leave them alone. So we want to know, why is one group of Americans allowed to vote on an issue and be protected, and another group of Americans not have a vote that's already been taken 15 years ago protected, as in the state of California voters?
Two-tiered system.
So the unconstitutionality may be a point where we actually get some changes, where federal judges are actually looking at this and going, hold on a second, that is unconstitutional.
I'm sorry, the 15 years ago, was that California law?
Yeah, Prop 215. And the problem with Prop 215, of course, is that it doesn't enable civil rights. It's just an affirmative defense. So there's a huge, vast difference between an affirmative defense and civil rights. And it didn't lay out a commercial industry. And I'm kind of at the point where I'm saying, hey folks, we're not going to fit, you know, a huge circle back into a tiny square. What the government is kind of putting out there is, well, we're not going after individual patients. The conservatives are putting out there, oh, we're not going after individual patients and growers. We just don't like the commercial facilities. And it's like, hold on a second here. So you're saying that Whole Foods or Rainbow Foods shouldn't have evolved into commercial entities, that they should have only been small little organic urban gardens that like this half of the room has one and this half of the room has one. And that may work for very small organizations like Axis of Love. That doesn't work for your person that, you know, expects the variety, expects the high quality, and wants to be able to have the availability, wants to be able to go to a trusted store and receive services, right? And then the other, you know, and the thing that I've always grappled with is that it's disabled, gainfully employed people that can consume at our facilities, right? Because a lot of medicine is still really the street price. I mean, if you go in and you look at what would be called an eighth of medicine, which is 3 grams, you're still looking at $50 to $60, which, if you're critically ill, is not going to last you very long, and you need a much higher quality if you're very sick, and you need the medicinal quality. And the medicinal quality is a big issue here because it has to be mold-free, it has to be pesticide-free. If you have cancer, you don't want to be smoking something from Dolores Park and take a risk, you know. And for some people, taking that risk is fine. The other thing that that we bring up that isn't really brought up in some of the other campaigns, and that is basically pressuring our city to come up with a municipal plan to facilitate safe access to catastrophically ill people. So let's say that the medical cannabis community isn't savvy enough to get itself to Congress and to change the law before the feds close all of San Francisco down. So there's 2 sets of people that will have access to medical cannabis after you close everything down. The friends of the very wealthy growers, and Axis of Love, because we know growers, and those will be the 2 sets of people that know where to go. Everybody else in the city who relies upon and has been reliant upon a healthcare system will be out. And that's not something that I think we can risk, and that's not something that we can risk as a sanctuary city. A lot of times I've heard this rumble lately of, oh, don't call it a sanctuary, call it safe haven, because of the confusion between immigrants and medical cannabis. And I don't go for that. I'm still going to call it a sanctuary city because that's the law. It was the sanctuary ordinance. And yes, it was modeled after the civil rights issues of El Salvadorians, but the issue here is not illegal people, but an illegal plant. And I think that anytime you draw the line with any species and a lot of people end up in jail, we've got a problem. And I think it needs to be acknowledged. And things are moving very quickly. Like I said, last night we had a huge, Monday, we had a huge federal situation in Oakland. So they are active in the Bay Area. And I think we got to go to Pelosi, and Pelosi's the person that we got to knock the door on.
I just have a question. So what actually happens when they come in and shut down the dispensaries? Are they arresting folks, or is it just that they're shutting down and fining, or what actually happens? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple of different things that actually happen. What happened on Monday was that they detained a few people And
Inside the building?
well, they went to Richard Lee's home, and they detained him at his home. They didn't officially arrest him. Basically what they love to do is they go to the computers, they go to the anywhere where they can find financial records. Those are the first things to go in the big bags. Then they take down all of the medicine, and you know, what we saw a couple of years ago in Los Angeles was what we called smash and grab. And what was literally happening is the DEA agents were coming in, they were turning the security cameras the other way, and they were also taking with them anything else they liked in the club. If they liked the flat screen TV, if they liked your stereo system, you know, and so it was very related to what I call sort of like piracy moves, right? Like, haha, we're about, you know, you can't do anything, you can't do jack, and they would literally leave the search warrant on the counter and look at the people in Los Angeles and say, you can open up 15 minutes after we leave. Now we're seeing a different realm. We're seeing the landlord letters, which evades having publicity. The landowners are not willing to go to jail for us for 40 years. Surprise, surprise. Most of the landowners are like, gee, I love you, but you're going to have to go. Because not only is it the federal forfeiture of the land that they own that the dispensary is in, it's criminal charges, it's a conspiracy starts at 20 years, you have another 20 years for allowing a building to be used for felony purposes. And so this is a really strategic way to avoid the patients that line up at the door in their wheelchairs that say don't come in. The press isn't getting those pictures as much anymore with the landlord letters, and that's what we're seeing in San Francisco. We haven't seen a full-on raid. I'm interested if Kathy from HopeNet comes to speak, because from what I understand, they are actually going to do civil disobedience and not close on Friday.
Where are they at?
They're at right on Howard and 10th.
Okay.
And so that may be our first San Francisco raid if they don't close when the feds ask them to. The Marin Alliance, Lynette Shaw, tried to do some court eviction stuff. But see, the thing is, it's not a court eviction case. Like, the landlord can't just say, hey, I want to take you to court and evict you. It's actually, you know, it's a federal grab of property because of a felony. So it's not as easy as, hey, I'm just going to take my tenants to court and tell them they can't be here, and maybe the state will say that they can. We tried to play that game. It didn't work in Marin. I'm not sure what will happen with HopeNet and their civil disobedience, but proud of people that are willing to do that. As of this Friday, I believe we have 5 closures happening, so we're up to 10 clubs that have been closed by the federal government. The thing that the medical...
Can I just, yeah, just for clarification, in San Francisco via those tactics, because isn't that what happened to the place up the street? The owner was told, not the dispensary so much, but I mean the owner told the dispensary, this is what's happening to me, you all have to leave.
Yep. And I mean, think about it, you know, if your family had, you know, invested in a building and etc., that's your only nest egg, right? And you were cool enough to let a dispensary open, everything seemed cool, state law seemed behind you, the city of San Francisco was behind you, your tenants went through very rigorous regulations, and then you're told, yeah, you keep them there, and we're taking you and your building. So a lot of the landowners, you know, are sad that they need to ask people to leave, but there's not a lot of alternatives, and what it really does is it shuts down legitimate safe access, and it shuts down, you know, a regulatory program.